Hi guys, today I'm working on writing more tests to the FXGL repository because we need a lot more tests. We're currently at, well, however many tests we have at the moment. But it's covering about 64% of the code base. And if we can get up to, well, more than 64, at least 70, that would be good. So currently we've got about 886 tests. So I've been thinking that this class needs to be tested because it's commonly used. LiftComponent, which basically makes an entity like bounce if you want to, or go up or down, left, right. It's a very sort of useful component. So it'd be good to have it tested. I'll just repurpose this test for this one. LiftComponent test. I don't know what the method name is actually, so I'm just going to see what we can do with it first. Speed and distance. Let's go with this one. So x-axis speed and distance. Speed is 100 units per second, I guess, and distance is 250. So that means something weird with indentation. This means we can assert that at the end of the cycle it reaches this 250, I guess. And it moves the entity, so we need to add an entity to it in order to perform the test. I'll need before each, so we can reuse this for multiple tests. And then E is entity, and then E add left. And then we can call onUpdate so that we can then do something with the result. Now let's set it to 300, I guess, so it's easier to calculate the values. If it moves 100 units per second, I think that's what the speed is, if it's then multiplied by TPF. Yep. That means it should get to 300 units in 3 seconds. On update, 3 seconds. And the result should be assert that entity X is close to 300. We can't say it's exactly 300 because actually the TPF is not going to be variable is not going to be a variable value since we're passing the TPF. So it's basically this multiplied by that, isn't it? Let's just test it. Let's assume that this is correct. Lift moving in x-axis. Okay, this is not good because it uses local timer, so it actually is bound to an engine. Yeah, because of this one, there's a dependency on fxgl, which means we can't really easily test it. Is this the only one? Right, so how do we get rid of this dependency? Uses game timer. I guess it just needs a local timer of some sort. So we need to be able to pass that in somehow. That's what you get when you don't use dependency injection. You get dependencies, and dependencies, hard-coded dependencies like this one, are very difficult to test because of this very issue. Because it thinks, well, it doesn't think, it's trying to access this, but obviously the engine isn't initialized yet. It doesn't even exist within the context of our test. So this is lift data. It is being used over here. So it seems like lift data needs to take this thing as a dependency. So it's no longer a var, it's just a val. Final. So this thing needs to be extracted now. This just goes away. It's really nice in terms of like the architecture. If you're struggling to write the correct, or I suppose find the right abstraction, if you write the test will actually give you some pointers related to what can be improved. For example, if you were reading this code, that wasn't probably much of a sort of big of a deal, but when you're testing it, that's when you're kind of realize that some things could be improved. This is the actual thing, so if I get rid of that, somehow pass the timer during construction, that would be good. So we need to embed this somewhere. This, I think, needs to go down here somewhere. And just extract it here, so it's like a separate thing. And it doesn't have to be inside a class. So there we go. That's how we pass the dependency in. We make this a constructor with an overload. And the reason for that is local timer. By default, just use this. So right, let me just finish this and then I'll. What we want is to be able to pass something in, and at the same time we don't want to change the API. We don't want the user constantly typing this thing when the user makes use of this class. That's one thing. Two is API. Because it's already a published version, you really want to be careful when it comes to changing API. And if you do really need to change API, you deprecate it first and only then remove it in some future versions. With an overload here, we're basically saying there are actually two constructors. One that takes this thing, and the other that doesn't take anything and by default initializes this. So we're saying there's a default value if nothing is passed in. And just before that, before this change, it had the no argument constructor. The LiftComponent class had the no argument constructor. So this overloads and the default value are going to give that same behavior, which will use this thing if we're not passing something in. However, for testing purposes, that's really great because we can just pass our timer without the need to initialize the engine. Because, you know, if you want to test just a very small component, you don't want to initialize the whole engine to test that. And then this is happy because everything is initialized. There's no late init var anymore, which is great because you don't want to late initialize stuff if you're able to do it via the constructor. And this looks good now. So we can now test it by passing in something into the lift component. So we need to basically construct a dummy timer. This one, new local timer. And that goes in here. That is perfect. So we can run this now. It shouldn't crash with the initialization error anymore. Brilliant. And it's even passing this test too. Great. So that's two birds, one stone, basically. We refactored the code. We kept the API. So from the user's perspective, nothing has changed. But from code quality perspective, we've got a massive improvement. Just notice this thing. This also needs to go, because that creates a new object every unupdate frame. Generally, we don't want that because of garbage collection and stuff. Because that generates garbage. I mean, in a normal Java application, that's fine. It'll be just removed. But if you're thinking like thousands of entities with potentially thousands of lift components, and that's running 60 times in one second, that's going to accumulate quite a lot of garbage. And if you're on mobile or embedded, that's going to cause a problem, potentially. Performance-related problem. But that's for later. I need to add other tests. So this is testing speed and distance. Left moving in x-axis with speed, distance. In x-axis with something else. X-axis, distance and duration. How about that? What does it take? Duration and distance. So if we're saying now we're going to move for 3 seconds, and then obviously update the 3 seconds, then that should be exactly the same, right? Because we're now moving 100 pixels or 100 units per second for 3 seconds. And then the 3 seconds we're saying, well, 3 seconds have passed. What's your distance? The distance is 300 because we're moving 100 per second. Oh, it doesn't mean that. Okay. It means we're moving. Yeah, that's not speed, that's distance. So yeah, that's fine. We're moving 100 units in distance over the duration of 3 seconds. We could strengthen the test, I guess, if we do something like this. So when half of the time has passed, then we should be at half of the distance. That's how maths works. And if the code works in the same way, then we're good. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Because we have now moved half of 3 seconds, and then we're just moving another half. Now let's add the final test for the x-axis, which is... Actually, I can probably throw in the y-axis in there somewhere as well. X-axis. So we've done distance and duration. We've done speed and distance. We need now to do speed and duration. So this is now speed. This is the duration. So it should be equal to this, is what I'm thinking. Because we're now moving at 100 units per second over 3 seconds. Yeah, that was good. Technically y is the same, but for completeness, I'll just add in the y-axis in there as well. I'll use 2 lifts. That should be fine, right? Lift x and then lift y. Can I use the same lift? Because we're not modifying anything in the other axis. Because y doesn't interfere with x, for example. So if I do this, I could just do the same, I think. And that will work. Yeah, that's fine. Lift moving in x, y, axes, the speed and distance. And then that simplifies the test somewhat. Well, I don't need to redo the tests, then just copy and paste this. Because they're the same values, they have to also be the same values. And in fact, we even know that the tests, the y-axis tests, are going to pass because the implementation is exactly the same for both of them. Let's run all the tests, and that's something that I'm happy with. We don't need these ones. Okay, that looks good. And this is... yeah, just in case I'm going to run all of the tests. But I don't think any of the other tests use lift component, so they should still pass. Refactor lift component, add lift component test. Okay, now that's out of the way, going back to the garbage collection thing. because these are not necessary, right? Because there is an overload for this, which takes 2 doubles. So what I'm thinking is set dx to 0, dy to 0, and then get rid of that. This is a double now, so the float thing isn't needed. And then this is dy. Dx, dy. How about that? That looks better, because we no longer have object allocation. And the good news is we now have the test to check that it actually works. It should. Yeah, that looks fine, because we haven't changed that much. That's dx, that's dy. So if dx is 0, then basically nothing changes here in the x-axis, and then dy is this. Yep, that looks fine. Yeah, I think that looks good. Remove object allocation in on update. Okay, and that's all pushed now. And so then going to go away and then get built on the CI server, which will then publish the test reports to CodeCall. If you're interested, I can actually cover the entire process. I've been thinking of doing a workshop for our university students, so I might just re-record that, and then actually I don't need to re-record that, I'll just record it live and then I'll just publish it on YouTube. Because there's quite a few processes involved in developing FXGL, and they could be quite useful if you're planning to create a library or something similar and host it off GitHub, Maven Central, and so on. Right, I think that is a successful DevStream for today, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.